Welcome to the Oddschecker US Open preview podcast and video ahead of the weekend's golf at Pebble Beach, one of the most popular courses for punters, for players and for spectators, sure to be an incredible weekend of golf. And to preview it, I'm joined by someone north of the border and south of the border from Ireland. I've got Dylan Beirne from the 15th Club on my right and Oddschecker's tipster Niall Lyons on my left. Niall is, I think, over 40 points up for the season so far, in a golf season that a lot of tipsters are finding quite difficult. So you've got to be pretty happy with that?
Yeah, I think I would hazard a guess the figure's slightly smaller than that after the last 2 weeks. Unfortunately, Stenson bogeyed the last night, took us out of a full place, but it has been a very tough year. It was a decent start for me, and I'm kind of just happy to be holding my head above water at the minute and in desperate search of a winner. It does feel a bit far away, to be honest. You know, you go so long, you're just searching around in the dark, but
you're still
hopefully
up,
this week.
Still up for the season, so
it's a positive, no doubt.
And last time we spoke, and it was ahead of the Masters. We tried to get you in for the PGA Champ for the SPGA. We didn't get you in, and you picked the winner.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So we'll add that to your P&L, even though
Yeah, no, that was a good week. Yeah. Being over there, we kind of had a look at the course, and it was playing so long. It was narrowing down who could win it a lot. So it seemed semi-obvious. I know it's easy to say now, but it seemed semi-obvious that it was going to be probably Brooks, DJ, or Rory that would be thereabouts. Unfortunately, they got over the line.
And for those people who didn't listen or watch the Masters preview, just tell us kind of briefly what the 15th Club does and what you do for them.
Yeah, so we work with we basically do all sorts of data analytics and kind of statistical work around golf. It's split between kind of media coverage with Sky, European Tour, and then a good chunk of it is with the players. So directly with players and caddies and coaches, where we kind of analyse their games or the courses that they're playing, or any sort of an edge we can give them, really. So that's the summary of what we're doing.
And no one better, therefore, to tell us about Pebble Beach and what we can expect, the challenges to be to players, where the scoring opportunities are going to come, and obviously given the data-driven approach that you yourself look at and the company looks at, what are the key metrics to look at here when you're trying to pick a winner?
Yeah, so we've obviously done the course guide for the players this week. It's a little bit tricky because we don't have too much detailed information, particularly about a US Open at Pebble. So we've tried to guide it on recent US Opens a little bit, and then a little bit on the AT&T at Pebble. So the bulk of what we found is that we're probably not going to be able to glean too much from the AT&T because it's played at a different time of year, it's different conditions. What we're expecting is, based on the 2010 US Open there, that there'll be a significant jump in the missed fairway penalty. So that will go up. I think it's about 50% higher we're expecting at the US Open as opposed to the normal PGA Tour event. So that's jumping up to, I think it was about 0.44. So basically, if a player misses the fairway, they're going to score about 0.44 higher than a player who hits the fairway. And then that's obviously due to the rough. Alongside that, there's going to be a big drop in the up and down percentage around the greens. Again, it's all very closely tied to the fact that the rough is long and thick, but that will be it's about 10 to 12% lower than PGA Tour average, so it's just over 50% up and down. And that kind of ties in with, I had a look at some of the numbers at recent US Opens and recent events at Pebble Beach, and the key stat that's popping up for me pretty much everywhere I look at it is the GIR. That hitting the greens is absolutely necessary. You need to be pinpoint accurate with your irons into the greens. One thing that actually kind of surprised me a little bit is that the driving accuracy wasn't necessarily a key factor. Even looking back at McDowell and Tiger the last 2 times there, Tiger was 14th in driving accuracy in that incredibly dominant performance, and then I think McDowell was 34th. So it's not a be all and end all hitting the fairway regularly, but they do have to find the greens. Tiger was first, and I think McDowell was 7th in greens and regulation. So it can kind of go either way because those two things are a little bit linked. It's obviously easier to hit the green from the fairway, but wherever the player ends up off the tee, they need to get a club on it and hit the green.
You say the rough around the green would contribute to a lot lower percentage of players getting up and down. Would you consider that a leveler when the rough's that big around the greens that you wouldn't necessarily look to those who have got a great scrambling game simply because it's just so difficult for the whole field?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think it's just going to drop for everybody. So for that reason, there's a lot of players that I'd look over a little bit. Players who maybe aren't as accurate, who make a bit more of their scoring around the greens, getting up and down. I think it'll level out a lot of that.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the winner of the AT&T this year was someone who's renowned, correctly or not, for his scrambling, in Phil Mickelson. And you maybe think that that's an example of where the change in course, the conditions of the course or the rough could make an impact. But looking away from just the pure stat side of it, we've spoken before about how in the Masters or Augusta, having that year-on-year form is so important. And you do have that to an extent. And people who aren't necessarily as regular punters or regular people who look into this kind of depth into golf might think with the AT&T they've already got that. But I'm guessing if you look at the winning scores of normally -15, -16, even up to -22, I think, 22 under Brant Snedeker was a couple of years ago. When you're looking through this, are you looking at that form at all, Niall, or are you just look out the window?
It's definitely not out the window, but it's important just to not place too much importance on it. I would look more towards, a positive if you've played well there, that you might putt well on Pomona greens, or you might go well by the sea, but with a little bit of wind, or those just seaside tracks. But it is chalk and cheese from the AT&T to the US Open setup, and we've seen some social media videos going about over the last week or two of players playing the course, and it is a totally different course. So, yeah, those who have went well on it before, it's certainly a positive, but it's not something that would make or break me backing or not backing somebody.
Yeah, so looking through the last two US Opens that have been held at Pebble, 2010 and the year 2000, GMAC, as we mentioned, won it in 2010 just ahead of Gregory Avray. With Tiger, DJ, Cooch, Mickelson and Snedeker all in the top 10, 5 players who I'm sure will have a few friends in the market in the coming days. In 2000, it was obviously the Tiger Blitz, but Lee Westwood and Padraig Harrington, two decent links players in the top 10. And you've also got Open champions in Ernie Els, Stuart Sink, David Duval and Nick Faldo in the top 10. So looking at those players and the conditions, and you mentioned the links track, is there a certain type of player that you think we should be looking at here?
Well, Dylan mentioned the accuracy off the tee there, but it contributes to 0.44 of a shot if you miss a fairway. I think that's going to be of extreme importance this week. But the bombers who have been suited by the first two venues of this year's major championships, I think this is going to be totally different. Length off the tee here. Although surprisingly, as you say, you do look at the stats of the last couple of US Opens, and accuracy maybe isn't as important, but I think it would be hard for me to look past the guys who really hit the fairways and as you say, greens in regulation. You looked at Bethpage when you were looking at it, and you just knew it was going to be dominated by the bombers. I always say every year that one of the Masters is one of the hardest majors to choose your winner, but you do know who's going to be up there.
Yeah.
The task is just choosing between them. So for the US Open this week, I'm definitely looking at the more accurate types. The course will become firm and fast by Thursday, so I think those who suffer with a bit of lack of length off the tee throughout the year will be suited, and they don't need to worry, or like your Kuchers, your Snedekers, your Kevin Kistners, guys like that. So off the tee, and just I'm not going too scientific at it this week. Just hitting your greens, and those who can hit the small targets.
I'm sure the same can't be said of you, Dylan, about not going too scientific about it. But we speak about. I mean, you mentioned greens and reg being important there. In terms of metrics such as strokes gained, does that mean tee to green would be where you're looking at in that respect, or would it not necessarily be that simple?
You generally look at a little bit of strokes gained off the tee and then quite a lot of strokes gained approach.
Okay.
Those two generally combine. I mean, the tee to green is kind of everything excluding putting, so that would factor in the short game as well, which I'm not really going to look at all that much this week, because as you said, it's very much a leveler. You get guys who are really good around the greens, if you're on 4 inches of thick rough, doesn't really matter how good you are, you're going to struggle to get it up and down. So that's the big thing. I mean, in terms of the greens as well, you mentioned going scientific there. We did a bit of work on, because there's kind of anecdotal evidence that the greens are quite small there, and we had a look at some of the shots. So basically, trying to recreate the size of the green from all the shots that were taken on the green, and I just wanted to kind of put a number on how small the greens are. So I think, having looked at that, they're around about 63% of the size of normal PGA Tour greens, or the average that we have shots for. And if you imagine that firmed up, on a warm day, they're going to be extremely difficult to hit. You need someone who's going to be pinpoint accurate. So I think that's going to be an even bigger factor. And then, of course, playing from the fairway, as you said, is going to be a big element of that.
So does that mean proximity to the hole the metric you look at for that?
Yeah, that would be a big one. Yeah. Probably proximity from the fairway too would be something worth looking at.
Interesting. So and so we mentioned there about Pebble, and if you can look at the form at Pebble form lines. Just a final note before we talk about the players themselves is US Open form, and it strikes me, given that it's an event that's held at a different course every year, it's hard to wrap your head around why it would matter. But as you've mentioned, Niall, the courses are normally set up in a very specific way, and scoring's generally pretty tough. So is it worth looking at recent trends in terms of players at the US Open, despite the fact that they may not have played at Pebble?
I think this US Open at Pebble Beach is going to be totally different to the last 4 or 5 that we've seen. I think from 2014 through 2017, I think the winning score totaled 34 under over those 3 or 4 US Opens. Previous to that, I think Rose won and 1 over, and then there was Webb Simpson at Olympic. And I think you're going back to those US Opens if you're looking for a pointer as to who can play well. Obviously in Webb Simpson's case, he won, and Furyk and McDowell were all in behind. I think we're looking towards the same type of players this week. Away from US Opens, I'd be inclined to look at courses with the Poana greens, courses by the sea. The likes of Torrey Pines, I think, will be a good course correlation. And then there's a bunch of courses that both McDowell and Tiger, the last 2 winners of the US Open, have played well on. I think they're always worth a glance. You can whittle out a few, but yeah, I quite like the Poana greens as a stat as well. Those guys who can play, it takes a certain, almost a certain strike of the ball to put well on those greens. Obviously, guys who grew up on them will have a significant advantage. Those who have won on those type of courses with Poana greens, there's a chunk of guys with really good records on those type of greens.
Anything in the Links Golf Open Championship link that I mentioned earlier, when you've got the likes of Tiger, Mickelson, Harrington, Els, Sink, Duval, Faldo, all performing well at Pebble and US Opens? Yeah,
I think so. Not necessarily links form I'm looking to, but I just think the Europeans will go well. Obviously the last 2 US Opens are Pebble Beach have gone really well. I think it throws up the possibility of an outsider winning it on quite a big price. Yeah, I'm looking towards a right bunch of guys who play the main bulk of their golf on the European Tour.
Well, it's interesting you say that, given it couldn't be more stark about how different it is the AT&T then, where I don't think there's ever been a European winner of that tournament. And
right.
And I think only 4 non-Americans have won it, and I think only 2 at Pebble. So I guess that goes to show how it's not necessarily worth looking at just that form in order to pick your winner here. But let's talk about the specifics now. And we are recording this on Monday morning after we all watched Rory McIlroy absolutely blitz it in Canada, nearly shoot a 59. He ended up with a 61 after bogeying the last, and that has meant that he has come into 8-1 favourite. That's with Bet365, who are paying 8 places. But I'll just say now, the firms who are currently paying 10 places: Sky Bet, Betfair, Paddy Power, Coral, and Boyle Sports, and they're all 8-1 as well on McIlroy. So 10 places, 8-1. Dustin is 9-1. Koepka 9-1. Tiger is 25-2. That standout with Marathon. Jordan Spieth 20-1. Patrick Cantlay at 20-1. Justin Rose at 28-1. So let's talk about, I guess, the big 4 as it is at the moment. Slightly different to the Masters, where with that smaller field we had a clutch of players. at shorter prices. Now it seems that there are 4 in front of the others. And Dylan, given what we saw yesterday from Rory McIlroy, is it fair enough that he is now a standalone favourite?
Yeah, no, I think it is fair enough. I mean, you can really say the top 3 guys, there's probably not a course in the world you could put them on that wouldn't suit them, to an extent. But the one thing I do think is Rory and DJ and Brooks, they're not going to have the same edge that they would do around somewhere like Bethpage. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, that was playing long, ball wasn't really running out that much. So they're getting a big advantage. They're hitting in 8 irons. Like the first at Bethpage is a good example of it, where they were hitting in a wedge, and I think Kevin now is probably hitting like a 7 iron. I mean, it's just, you can't overcome that gap. I don't think we're going to see that a lot this week at Pebble, so I think the advantage will be a lot less. But, granted, they're the 3 best players in the world in majors anyway. I think of those 3 guys at kind of 8-1, 9-1, Koepka's a bit of from a statistical point of view, for me, he's a bit of an anomaly. I've been trying to kind of build in some way into our model of estimating how likely he is to win a major, but it's difficult. I mean, I had a look this morning at his strokes gained on the field over the majors since the start of 2017. He's gaining about 4 strokes on average, which is, above and beyond everybody else. So if you use that number, he comes out at 5-1. But so yeah, I mean, it's tough to estimate just how short he should be. But yeah, I mean, Rory's definitely he's justified at being that price. He's been playing fantastic this year. It's like I kind of mentioned earlier. It seems like he's backed more towards where he was in kind of 2011 to 2014, 2015. Where he's blitzing fields on a Sunday like that. Of the big 4, as you say, I think Tiger would probably be my pick at that level. We've kind of touched on some of the reasons, but I think hitting greens and his pinpoint accuracy this year has been exceptional. He can strategize his way around here better than he can at most, probably pretty much any other US Open venue. So I think getting him at kind of 3 points bigger is probably the way I'd go up the top 4 there, yeah.
Niall, how are you feeling about? I think you're looking to swerve the lads at the top, but rather than just ruling them all out, just take us through the 4 of them and how you rank their chances.
Well, Rory last night was phenomenal stuff, and probably one of the most enjoyable rounds of golf I've watched on TV for a few years. Playing out of his skin all year, and yeah, but I just don't get the impression that you say that these lads just aren't going to be, their length that which usually gets them so much of an advantage over the rest, is just going to be a bit negated here at Pebble Beach. And for that reason, we previewed the Ryder Cup last year, and we sat here and I said that I thought Europe should be favourites just simply because of the course. I don't think the market has allowed for how Pebble Beach is going to play. To think back retrospectively, obviously Koepka won the PGA, Dustin runner-up in both the first 2 majors. Looking back retrospectively, I can't have Dustin a shorter price now than what he was for them first 2 majors, even with the 2 runners-up. Likewise for Koepka, even winning the PGA. Obviously you say that there's not a course that you can't put them on, that they can't win on, which is true, but when you look at the market, the course holds is so important, and Bethpage was just set up for them guys. Augusta's set up for them. I just don't think the market's right. I don't think there should be any golfer single figures in this field.
Who do you have as your favourite?
Probably DJ. He's got those 2 runner-ups in those majors in a canter, not even playing anywhere near his best golf. I think Koepka is just, as you say, he's an anomaly. He could do it. Obviously these guys can hit irons off the tee as well, where the likes of the guys that I'm maybe looking to back this week will all need to hit fairway woods and drivers from time to time, and those guys can get around, with slightly more conservative clubs off the tee. But I can't really be having any of them at single figures. McIlroy playing unbelievable stuff, could easily do. He looks, as you say, like he's getting back towards his best of, where he won those glut of majors in a couple of years. But for me, their advantage is just slightly less this week than compared to the first couple of majors, and the market hasn't really accounted for it.
Let's talk about a clutch of major winners in recent years who find themselves in that next bracket of players. Jordan Spieth has made something of a return to form in patches, and he's now 20-1. Justin Rose, who of course has won a US Open, is 28-1, and Justin Thomas is 30-1. Three guys there who I think to the layman who's looking at this market for the first time would probably have a look at this and see those prices and get fairly excited. But there's going to be a reason behind where they are in the market, whether that's form or the setup of the course. So how do you look at those three guys who have got experience winning majors, who all have, especially if you're looking at someone like Rose and Jordan Spieth on their day, can their short irons are amongst the best in the world. So how would you assess their chances?
Starting with Jordan Spieth, I think when he was at his best, it was his long game was probably one of the most underappreciated elements of anyone's game ever. His long game was excellent. His approach play was fantastic. He was up there with some of the best in the world, and then he was holding the putts. So it seems like his putting is getting back to where it needs to be, but I'm not sure his approach play is back at that level. And kind of, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I think the approach play is going to need to be tip top this week to really contend.
I think that's the gamble you take, though, isn't it? If you're going to back him, whether it's going to come together just for 1 week, I think that's kind of factored into the price almost. That it's only going to take 1 week of a good long game from the winning event.
Potentially, yeah. He just would at kind of 16s, 18s. I wouldn't take him at that price. I think there'd be, looking at Rose there. Of those three, he'd probably be the one I'd go with. His approach play has been pretty solid this year. He hasn't been anywhere near his best. He's probably one of those where I'd look at him and go, if it comes together for him this week, then he could easily win it. Justin Thomas at that price, he's 28 there. There's obviously an element of the injury.
Yeah.
There's a bit unsure about him. If I was sure he was going to come in, he was fit, he was 100%, then I'd be all over that price. But
he played okay last week, Benji, a bit better than I expected. I kind of was worried about him after the first round, shot a good second round, but I was kind of thinking there could be a period of a month or two where we really don't see the best of him at all, but he was decent enough last week. Yeah,
his approach play is stellar. He's one of the best in the world. Over the last couple of years, he's been top 5 consistently on approach, so he'd be one that, like I said, I think there's an element of that price is just the risk that he's not at 100%, and trying to hit out a thick rough with an injured wrist is probably a little bit of a concern, but that's probably a fair price for him. Like I said, if I was sure he'd be 100% fit, then I'd be all over that. But.
Well, a player, Niall, that you have had a decent time with before in Francesco Molinari comes in as well. Another previous major champion in the Open Championship last year, and probably what was one of the, just using the eye test, one of the most incredible 18 holes I've seen in terms of solid approach play from Molinari on that Sunday last year. He's 35-1, having gone very, very close to winning back-to-back majors at Augusta. And as I mentioned, players with a decent links record seem to do pretty well at these US Opens at Pebble Beach. So is he someone who's on your list who fits the criteria that you're looking for, or is there a bit of a form concern?
Bit of a form concern for me. I just don't think he's been slightly at his best ever since the match play, which he looked nailed on to win, going in the closing stages. He wouldn't strike me as someone who's specifically a great links player, even though he won the Open Championship last year. I just think that test really suited him, where tee to green was so important. The Europeans obviously do go well here, and he could be one to look to, but just doesn't convince me this season, as you say, form wise. And
then just to rattle off the next few, and then we'll ask you guys who you like. I know a couple of players you want to talk about. Patrick Cantley at 20-1, John Rahm at 28-1, Xander Schauffele at 28-1, Ricky Fowler 28-1, Adam Scott 33-1, Hideki Matsuyama 35-1, Jason Day 35-1, and Tommy Fleetwood 35-1. Anyone there who catches your guys' eye initially before you're getting to the kind of 50-1 plus?
There's not an awful lot below 50-1 I'm looking to this week, but there's a handful, and Fleetwood would be one of them. simply because I think the course might play quite similar to what Paris National did, just off the tee, you know. It's just going to be that important to keep the ball in play from tee to green, that, you know, that's where you're going to make your score. Patrick Cantlay is a big talking point, whether, you know, the 16 to 20 to 1 up there about him is crazy value, because there's people talking about him that he's a future world number one. Yeah. I'm not totally convinced. I don't know why, but just with my own eye, I'm just not totally convinced that he's as good as what some people think he is or think he might be.
People who are only taking interest in majors alone will listen to this and hear that he's 20 to 1 and think that's, you know, why is he not 50s or 66s?
Yeah, well, I think it's a crazy price as well. Like, yeah. You know, I don't even think of it back him at 28s, to be honest. Yeah. Like, you know, I'm not that keen, but he does have a lot of credentials to play well around a track like this. Just he doesn't really have a weakness, and the way he played there a couple of weeks ago was very impressive, but just doesn't totally convince me, and I don't like the price.
Yeah, Dylan?
Yeah, Cantlay is actually he's quite an interesting player from a performance point of view. So we have basically, it's called performance index, like our alternative world rankings, and he's actually at third at the minute. So we have him as kind of the third best player in the world now. Granted, it's kind of the flip side of Koepka, where he's done it in, you know, week to week tournaments. He's performed well and maybe hasn't shown major winning form. You know, particularly is around the time he got in contention at the Masters, and he just fell off a cliff there, didn't even place in that. That was kind of a concern. So I think, yeah, I mean, the price is probably, for me, it's probably a little bit short as well, that it'd be his ability to close it out. I think in that situation will probably be a bit of a concern for me. Fleetwood, again, for that exact reason.
Yeah, hasn't won in the States. There's a few negatives and all there.
Yeah, but he's shown that he can do it on courses where there's a high missed fairway penalty, which is, you know, it's obviously going to be relevant. Le Golf National being the obvious one, you know, and he's performed well around there a couple of times now, and that has, even on the European Tour and the French Open, that has a high missed fairway penalty, so it's similar. Same last year, you know, he obviously had the excellent round there last year in the US Open, so yeah, he'd be of interest to me. That's probably it for me, I think, in that range up to kind of 40s or so. I don't think there's anyone else would pop up for me.
I think Tony Finau might
he's the next one.
come into the question, like around 40 to 1. I think that's tasty enough price. He's got a decent major record to this point in his career. Has played well at Torrey Pines. Just ticks a lot of the boxes for me, and I thought he would have a big year. It hasn't really materialised yet, but Pebble Beach might be a place where you could see the best of him.
Well, you've said that you're mainly looking at 50 to 1 plus, and that's what we've got to now. So I'll let you talk us through a couple of the players that you've singled out at the moment. Worth mentioning that Niall's column will be online fairly soon, and he hasn't firmed up his selections yet, so still time for him to change them, but this is just what he's thinking at the moment. So yeah, tell us who you're looking at bigger prices.
Where do I start?
Let's have the headline.
It's not a short list, it's a long list. I think, as I say, the market looks really appealing to me, just simply because I think the guys at the top are far too short. I think the market hasn't really factored how the course is going to play into it. You know, no matter what major we went to this week, those guys wouldn't be any different price, would they?
No.
You know, coming to Pebble Beach, they definitely should be. They definitely should be bigger than that. So I'm looking to guys who played well last week. Snedeker, Kuchar, obviously have big credentials at Pebble Beach as it is anyway. They've played well there before, especially Snedeker. But I don't think those guys should be as big a price as what they are. You know, you kind of need to pinch yourself as well. You don't, backing these guys in major championships, you know, hasn't really been the way forward down the years, and plenty of people, I'm sure there's guys out there who've backed Snedeker in every single major in the last 10 years, like, you know what I mean? I'm going to get a lot of stick back home for tipping them up, I'm sure. If I do, I'm not too sure if I will or not yet, like, but those guys, I think Kuchar should be a max of 28 to 1. I don't think Snedeker should be anything bigger than 40s either.
So Snedeker 66 to 1 at the moment with Betfred, and currently 50 to 1 about Cooch, who I'm sure will be a very popular winner over in there.
It's a crazy price. It has to be a crazy price. Though.
With 365. And quickly, I'm going to come and ask you the same question in a sec, so be ready. But let's just give a quick tip of the cap to Graham McDowell, who won here, of course, in 2010, and yesterday holed what was a 30-footer on 18 to get to Portrush to play in the Open there, which will be a dream for him. He said, I think 5 years ago, that it'd be a dream come true to play the Open there, and he very nearly wasn't going to make it. And he surely is a player again who fits a lot of what you're looking for. Yeah,
definitely. And just the way he did that last night, it's just typical McDowell. That's McDowell of old. Like, you know, looking at the leaderboard, and obviously he needed to finish in the top 3 places of the guys who hadn't qualified yet, but inside the top 10. And he ends up in trouble in 18. You're just thinking the worst. You know, if he didn't get it last night, it was a tall order after that. The whole that 30-footer in the last, just typical McDowell. You remember him doing it in the Chevron against Tiger, holding crazy putt in the last green and all. He's done some spectacular things, but yeah, obviously won the last time at US Open and ticks every single box this year again. And I don't think is he what top price of him 800.
Yeah,
you know, no bigger than 66s for me. I think these are all value guys. Just, you know, McDowell shouldn't end up in too much trouble, and he's riding the crest of a wave, obviously, and he's had a lot of attention lately as well, and will have a lot of attention this week too. And I think he will probably thrive off that.
Well, I mean, he said after his win here back in 2010 that it derailed his career for a bit, and it would be a hell of a way for that to come full cycle for him to come back and win it again before going to Portrush for the Open Championship. So Dylan, similar kind of question, I guess, that 50-1 bar, which starts at Bryson DeChambeau and goes up to the no hopers at about 2,500 to 1. Where I know there's one former US Open winner whose price has gone slightly after a good weekend in Canada, who you're quite keen on.
Yeah, Webb Simpson is. I've been looking at him, backed him last week. I was hoping he might get over the line last week, but even at the 50s there, 8 places, I still think there's a little bit of value in him. It's kind of like Niall touched on it there. I feel like this has been priced up like it's an average US Open over the last 5 years or whatever. So Webb Simpson and Matt Kuchar at that kind of range, I think it's their best chance to win a US Open, and I think there's no reason they shouldn't be shorter than that. If you look at the field last week, there was a lot of top players up in Canada, and Webb Simpson was top price 22 to 1, and he's gone off 50s this week. You know, it's a big jump for not a huge difference in the field. So yeah, I mean, I think those two guys, Simpson and Kuchar leads the PGA Tour. Last time I checked, he led the PGA Tour in greens and regulation this year. Fantastic major record over the last couple of years.
Just can't win.
Can't win, yeah. Well, maybe,
just can't win then.
Yeah, can't win then, yeah. But I mean, like, he hadn't won a lot coming up to this year, but he's 2 wins already this year. So
he's playing out of his skin.
Yeah. So
and it's not a hot streak. He's been doing it since January or December.
Yeah. So I think that those two guys will be in that range. Will be definitely of interest to me.
So anyone at bigger prices are now looking into the hundreds plus. We spoke earlier. Did you, Niall, mention Danny Willett as well? Or was that?
Yeah. Played well last week as well in Canada, and just kind of that similar game to GMAC, and obviously he's got a major under his belt, and winning in Dubai at the end of last year just, you know, confirmed that his game was back in working order, and I just think he's slightly overpriced this week again. I'm looking at all the same type of golfers, aren't they? Like,
it seems to me like it's a guy basically who's going to be consistently hitting fairways. Length isn't a massive positive. Who can stick the ball close, and if they have a hot streak with a putter, that's great. In effect.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why he should be bigger than 80 to 1 either. Like, you know, there's just a bunch of these guys. Andrew Putnam's another one for me. He sits inside the top 50 in the world now. Finished second at the Sony earlier on in the year, and putted so well that week that we had backed Kuchar, and he was a total menace to us over the weekend there, run us all the way to the line. So he was actually fourth in Shishan as well at the HSBC, which is kind of there's a decent course correlation there. You know, Tiger's had 2 runners up and 2 6th place finishes, and McDowell is has finished in the top three times there. There's a bunch of other course correlations as well, but just I think Putnam's sitting there at a massive price inside the top 50 in the world. Obviously, it's a real left field one, but it would probably surprise many people out there to know that he's actually inside the top 50. But he's had a great year and a couple of solid finishes, and he's another outsider I'm looking to.
Any more? The big prices?
I quite like at the kind of bigger prices there, Eric Van Rooyen. He's been a little bit under the radar. He's played well the last while. He was really thereabouts for quite a while at the PGA. Finished, I think, tied 8th there. So, you know, he can obviously do it, and you know, he can hit the fairways in places that there's a high penalty. Interesting side fact is that he probably needs a top 10 to get special temporary membership in the PGA Tour. So I feel like if he's tied 5th or 6th on Sunday afternoon, he's going to go and, you know, he'll hold it out and finish top 10. So just the
place want to look to in the extra markets then, maybe someone who'll look to consolidate a score at the weekend.
Potentially, yeah. It's hard to know in that situation, but you'd like to think he'll get it done. So yeah, I mean, I think he was something like 20th just this week gone. So
14-1 with Boyles for a top 10, and went very well at the Open Championship last year as well. So has some decent links.
Your first round leader bet
broke my heart. Although we got the dead heat in, so I think it was okay in the end. But yeah, that was an interesting day. Talking of the specials markets, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at it at all, but is there anything we should be looking at? Any top, any of the special stuff? Anyone you'd be looking for a top 20, top 10 finish? I know I tipped up Kodaira in the as 1,000-1 in the Masters, but he did make the cut, so that was all okay. But I don't have any of those for you today, sadly.
It's just the same type of golfers that I'm looking to. I think Tyrrell Hatton might go well. Obviously a 2-time Dunhill Links winner. But he was 6th at Shinnecock last year, which is, you know, pretty impressive. He's a bit of a grinder as well, just goes well in hard conditions. Justin Harding's another European Tour player. He's had a great year. I just think he's a bit overpriced at the minute. He's around 250-1 mark, so I think any top 10 or maybe top South African for him.
I think if anyone is listening to this pod or watching it and with a pen in their hand and a piece of paper, I think they're probably going to have to have got a new pad after the amount of golfers we've gone through. But fingers crossed that both of these guys have flagged up some guys you like the sound of or like the look of. But before we finish this, I'm going to ask you both for your best bet for your lay, so the golfer you want to get against, and for an outsider to keep an eye on. Niall, I'll come to you first.
For the outsider to keep an eye on, I haven't mentioned him yet, but I'll mention him now because I wanted to. Kevin Kistner. Really good major record, just hasn't quite got over the line. So he went well at Carnoustie for a great part last year as well. Ticks all my boxes of just keeping the ball in play. Won the match play earlier on in the season, and I think he showed real guts in winning that. He was really especially good, impressed me.
Pummeled in the final the year before as well. So
yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think maybe he's possibly reached just another level, and if he gets into contention in any major championship soon, he might just get over the line.
And then your best bet?
Lay?
Bet or lay. Best bet and lay I need as well. So best bet outsider. You've done the outsider.
My best bet towards the top of the market at the minute would probably be Kuchar.
And the lay?
Brooks.
Lovely. Dylan?
I think if I was going like the top end of the market, I'd have Tiger. Be the best bet for me. There's no question about whether or not he can get it done there. I think it doesn't really need much explaining. I just think it should fit him well this week. I think a little bit further down, Webb Simpson would probably be the next best bet for me. A little bit further down the market, I like that. You know, still at 50s. I think he was 66s not that long ago, but the 50s is still value there. I think the lay for me, I think, would be DeChambeau. He's gone off the boil big time. Fair enough, he's a big enough price, it's easy to lay now. But I think he's just gone off the boil. I think one of the big things will be probably his temperament. Around that course, it's not going to be easy to kind of grind it out and strategize properly. And I just don't think he's mentally prepared for that kind of challenge at the minute to win a US Open. So,
do we think John Rahm's capable enough of holding it together for 4 days around a track like that? He's got a great record on Poana greens, and just that type of, he actually went well at Paris National for the most part too, before like succumbing on the back nine, but he ticks a lot of my boxes. It's just whether you think he could hold out for 4 days and be patient enough and have the right mindset.
Yeah, that'll be my concern with him as well. I mean, like on paper, he's obviously he's a good enough player to win it, but I think, like you said, I'd just be concerned, especially, you know, he came out at the players and said, "Oh yeah, I'm over all that now. I'm matured," and then he goes out, it's the 11th or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, that'd be the concern for me. I think that's probably factored into that price there that he's at. So, no, he wouldn't be a bet for me.
Well, I'll be amazed if you've watched or listened to this and haven't come up with one or two bets from the experts alongside me. So thanks very much to Dylan. Check out the 15th Club. Follow Dylan on Twitter and follow the 15th Club on Twitter, because they put out some unbelievable stuff. If you're interested in golf data and the stats behind what goes on the course, then there's really no one better to follow. And I'm sure you'll be hearing about them as well during Sky's coverage of the event. And also, as ever, cheers to Niall, who's tipping article should be up fairly soon, and fingers crossed it's got some correlation with what you've said on here. Otherwise we'll probably be in a bit of trouble. But subscribe to our YouTube channel as well for content over the whole week, and check the odds, check the grids. Go to oddschecker.com and then go to golf, and you can find out all the best prices for your bet. And you can also check all the place terms, because some bookies going 10 places already to make sure that you're getting the most places and the best value for your selection.